I want to point out one other thing too, because what she's talking about these companies and these businesses that are going out and they are not doing right by the American people. And she's talking about the companies that have been doing this. This is not a new thing. This is something that has been going on for over decades. And I want to share something here real quick. This comes from the um, the Economic Policy Institute. And they did a study on the difference between the amount of money that CEOs make versus their workers. And I want to go over a few of the key findings here. The growth of CEO compensation between 1978 and 2021, using the realized compensation measure, compensation of the top CEOs increased 1,460.2% from 1978 to 2021, adjusting for inflation. Top CEO compensation grew roughly 37% faster than the stock market growth during this period, and far eclipsed the slow 18.1% growth in a typical worker's annual compensation. CEO granted compensation rose 1,050.2% from 1978 to 2021. It goes on, growth of CEO compensation during the pandemic. So this is between 2019 and 2021, and this is important to note as well. The dramatic increase in CEO compensation during the pandemic is remarkable. While millions lost jobs in the first year of the pandemic and suffered real wage declines due to inflation, in the second year, CEOs realized compensation jumped 30.3% between 2019 and 2021. Typical worker compensation among those who remained employed rose 3.9% over that same span. So this is what she's talking about. We're talking about the price gouging. So if you really truly want to understand why inflation got high, and it got as high as 9.1%, and food prices still are a little bit higher than they should be, this is exactly the kind of investigation you should be doing. This isn't something that you should be just taking for granted, or listening to somebody else say something, or listening to a propaganda media that is fueled by billions of dollars to fool you and to sucker you into thinking that the people who are making all the money aren't doing this to you, that it's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris doing this to you. But if I pose the question, exactly what did Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do to make prices of food go up? Nobody can answer that question, but it says it here quite plainly that these CEOs are making money during the pandemic. And how are they doing that? They're jacking up the prices of their food, and they're saying, we have to do this because there's a pandemic, we have supply chain issues, and if we don't jack up our prices, then we're going to lose a lot of revenue. And in some respects, you understand that if that was true throughout 2019 and 2021, but it wasn't true throughout that entire time. In fact, what they did is they jacked up their prices during COVID under the guise that we have supply chain issues and we need to do this in order to not lose revenue and to at least stay steady, or not lose more revenue than we thought we were going to lose. So if some of that is true, fine, no problem. But what happened is they jacked up their prices, and then when everything smoothed out, there was no more supply chain issues that would hold up their goods coming in to resell. They continued to keep their prices high and never lowered them. That is a reason, and a big reason, why inflation stayed high. So to continue to blame somebody because you just have been fooled into believing that this is a person or one person's particular uh, plans or their president, so they're responsible for the high prices of food. But the same people, when Kamala Harris says, I'm going to stop price gouging, the same people are going, you can't do that. You can't control the prices of food for companies. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth, and you're not really understanding what you're saying. And that's what really drives me insane. But I want to go over a couple of few other things here. The implications of growth of CEO to top 0.1% of compensation ratio. The fact that CEO compensation has grown far faster than the pay of the top 0.01 of wage earners indicates that CEO compensation growth does not simply reflect a competitive race for skills, the market for talent, that also increases the value of highly paid professionals more generally. So basically, what that is saying is, I relate to this a little bit because I was in the auto industry. I was in the car business for quite some time. And back in the old days, the car business was filled with, you know, the car business has never had a good reputation at all. They just haven't. And there's reasons for that because they were ripoff artists. And you go in and buy a car, you don't really know what's in the car. Especially back then when you didn't have internet, you didn't have all that stuff. Um, but the car business still had, the older guys who had families, and they were there to earn a real wage so they can build a middle class or even a higher than middle class family and earn wages. And that was their job. But the car business now, if you look into it, if you ever go buy a car right now, what you're going to see is you're going to see a 19 to 24-year-old kid who has absolutely no idea what they're doing. And basically what they're doing with these kids is they're paying them as little as possible, and they are sending them out on test drives, and the management, who gets paid more money, are the ones who come in and close the deals. So, they're renting basically salespeople, because you could go into a car dealership right now, go into it 6 months from now, it's a whole new staff. You might see some management that is the same. There's a good chance that management won't be there either. But what they do with these sales kids is what I call them now, is they throw them out there. They cross their fingers that hopefully one or two of them take their job seriously and turn out to be a good salesperson, so the management team doesn't have to close every single deal. But that's basically what it comes down to. And it gets really frustrating for customers, because you go in there to buy this car, you're dealing with a kid who has absolutely no idea how to negotiate. They don't know any idea of what the buyer is even trying to tell them. And they go and try to relay this to somebody at the desk who is the manager, and the manager yells at the salesperson for being an idiot. The salesperson's going back scared to death, really not knowing how to present these numbers back to them. And then maybe 30 minutes to an hour later, you'll get somebody who knows more about the price of the car and will negotiate. And by then you're frustrated, and you're either like, I got to get out of here, or hell, let's just buy the car. So that has been my experience, but it's also too a reality. Call any customer service right now, especially with major corporations. Try to call a customer service number and get in touch with somebody in a reasonable amount of time. I swear, 2 weeks ago, I had to call Bank of America about something on my account. It literally took 45 minutes for somebody to finally answer the phone. It was incredibly annoying. And then when they answered the phone, I was transferred twice, and people still couldn't answer the question. And again, this is what these corporations do. They know they have to have some sort of customer service, but they pay very little. So the people who are going to take those jobs are just happy to have a job. And they're scared to death half the time answering the phone calls because they don't know what to say other than they're reading off a script, or you ask them a question and what do? They type into a computer. You can even hear them type. Blah, 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 and they're typing in your question to see if some sort of AI answer will come up so they can answer your question. And it is incredibly annoying. But again, this is how these CEOs are making more and more money. They're cutting more and more people's pay, and they're getting less and less talent so they could put more money in their pockets. And they're kind of like, damn customer service, who gives a shit? Or, I don't really care if this kid is a good salesperson. Doesn't really matter. We're just going to throw that kid out there. We're going to pay the management a pretty decent amount of money, and everybody else we're going to pay as little as possible. So that way the owners and the top 1% of these companies get more money in their pockets. And that's just not the car business. That's just not major corporations when it comes to your customer service. This is all corporations. And the ruse was during the Reagan administration is that these people really what they wanted to do was cut taxes for us so we can take the money that we're saving and we're going to pay you guys more money. And that was the ruse. And you could see clearly that that just is not the case. Ever since they announced this idea of the Reagan tax cuts so we could do the trickle down economics and pass it down to our workers. Some companies did that, but a majority of companies did not do that. And what happened? The wage gap between the owners and the workers became more and more and more and more. During the 60s, it was probably about a 20-to-1 owner to the employer or to the employee. Now it's about 400-to-1. I mean, that is insane. And this is what Democrats are really nailing down on. They're basically saying, okay, enough tax breaks for you. And in fact, we're going to raise some taxes on you so we could do more things for the American people overall. It drives me nuts when I hear people talk about Ukraine. We're giving money to Ukraine. Why don't we do stuff for the American people? But then when I tell you, oh, Kamala Harris wants to do this for the American people and she wants to use tax dollars by taxing corporations to do it. No, you can't do that. That's communism. It's really started to get irritating that people are not just looking at, forget about the big picture. They're not even looking at the middle picture or the small picture. They're just looking at a picture that they're being fed and they're being told. Now you could look at me and go, aren't you being fed? Where are you getting your information from? Where are you reading your news? Well, one, I go to websites and I read facts like that. I don't watch cable news. I don't do any of that stuff. I look at something, and even if I do listen to a podcast or two that is on the same side that I am, I will listen. And if something sounds too good to be true, or if it does sound really good, I will investigate it to make sure that it is true and to make sure that it's right. But a lot of people don't want to investigate anything. They just want to hear, regurgitate. Half the time, what they regurgitate is wrong anyway. But even if they regurgitate it exactly verbatim of what they heard, that's wrong too. So either way, you're wrong. But that gets really super frustrating.